And President Emeritus International Stability Operations Association Doug Brooks joins me from Dubai to talk about this day and the long-lasting effect it has had, not just on the victims, but everyone across the world. It's good to have you join us at this time. The 9/11 attack was unprecedented, and so was the reaction to this. But can we now say that the war on terror was the right response at that time?
It probably has not turned out as well as one would have hoped. I think initially after 9/11, there was a lot of international unity behind the United States. There was a feeling that the United States had been attacked unfairly. And you had NATO came together again, and you had a lot of other countries from around the world that supported the United States in their invasion of Afghanistan, in their attempts to take down Al-Qaeda. And so you had a strong sense of unity and a strong sense of justice behind the initial U.S. reactions. But that would change. And especially when the United States invaded Iraq, which they claimed had some ancillary connection to the 9/11 attacks, but really didn't. A lot of that support faded, and a lot of the international sort of efforts that had been there kind of dissipated. So things changed, and it's kind of unfortunate, I think, that we ended up with 20 years of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and not a whole lot to show for it, except a lot of money down the drain.
And the day is still regarded as a time that the war changed. Memorials are being held across the United States, but this is an event that really impacted the world. Let's talk about terrorism not being new, especially with the use of the internet. We're entering an era where some of the most dangerous attacks may no longer involve explosives. But what are the major lessons that you think we may have learned then, and what should be put in place at the moment?
Well, in terms of cybersecurity and things, obviously our world today relies much more on the internet, on AI now, and other things. So we have a lot of other reliances and other nodes that can be attacked by terrorists or by people who are trying to disrupt things. I think it is somewhat instructive that when you take a look, for example, at the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Russians did try to disrupt Ukraine using cyber attacks and things, and the disruption was fairly temporary and not very damaging. Could terrorists do something similar? Probably. If you think of an Al-Qaeda terrorist essentially inspiring computer hackers around the world to attack infrastructure, to attack various targets, yeah, they can do some damage. Would it be on the scale of 9/11? That's a little bit hard to imagine. And I think when you have smaller attacks, it essentially gives some clues about what could happen, and there's a response. There's a resilience that is built into computer systems and AIs. We don't know for sure, but I don't think we're going to see anything quite on the scale of 9/11.
24 years after, terrorism is still a major concern across the world. Well, Africa was not a direct target at that time, but now we see that the continent has increasingly become a front line in global terrorism, counter-terrorism effort. So how would you say that the post-9/11 security agenda really shaped the military presence that we see in Africa?
Well, Africa certainly has experienced a lot of terror, of course, and a lot of it is Al-Qaeda influenced, let's say, or inspired. Of course, you have AQIM, you have Boko Haram, you have Al-Shabaab, that all have some sort of affiliation to Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda-like organizations, and they continue to disrupt things. For some time, I think the West was helping Africa certainly combat these things, but that's been reduced lately, and I think the West, especially the United States, has really pared back a lot of its military and security support for Africa efforts against these terrorist groups. I think the old vision was that the U.S. would and Western states would confront terrorism abroad, would confront them wherever it would arise. Now, certainly under President Trump, they're saying, okay, we're just going to deal with terrorism when it arrives in the country. So that's a little crazy. I think one of the other things that the U.S. did very well initially after 9/11 was soft power. So they put a lot of money into USAID, the aid programs, into various things like the Millennium Challenge, AGOA, the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, to really try and develop the strength of African governments, of African countries, of African democracies, of African economies. So I think that program had been, running fairly strongly initially, and then had been kind of tapered off, and now we see that Trump has largely ended those programs. We'll see what happens, but I don't think it's good for Africa that essentially you're seeing the U.S. Turn away and basically leave Africa to without the additional support and money and expertise that could really make a difference in the continent.
Well, some persons will contest that statement that you made, saying the United States will do what it can to support Africa. There are diverse views on that. But let's talk about some of the failures or errors on intelligence that preceded the 9/11 attacks. If some of these have really been corrected, and perhaps some of those lessons, have they reshaped the way nations have addressed terrorist groups, considering some of the ongoing conflicts going on today? I mean, the Israel-Gaza war, the Russian-Ukraine war itself.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So initially, the United States had fragmented intelligence of its own, which is why the 9/11 plot succeeded. So you did not have the CIA talking to the FBI very well, to the State Department, and so on. And some of the initial fixes after 9/11 were very good, which really improved the communication within the U.S. Also internationally, of course, you have something called the Five Eyes, which are all the English-speaking developed countries that had a sort of unified intelligence system that was very effective. So you had a really improved intelligence system for some years. However, that has also, within the United States, you had some leaks that ended up in WikiLeaks quite famously, and forced some of this intelligence sharing to be pared back because of the risk of it being leaked out by low-level operatives and so on, as happened. So that hurt the intelligence domestically. Internationally, you had the Five Eyes, which were running quite strongly until, again, Donald Trump, who really is not interested in this sort of international intelligence system. And we've seen, especially in his second term here, he's really forced a lot of the top intelligence people to retire or to quit because of the people that he's appointed, some of whom are closely affiliated, for example, with Russia, which is one of our strategic, or one of the United States' strategic rivals. So the whole Five Eyes, I think the other countries that are part of the Five Eyes, England, Australia, New Zealand, and so on, they have to think really hard before they share information with the United States, because there's a strong possibility that that information could be leaked or misused. So the intelligence systems have broken down. There's, I think, as a result, I think, getting back to your point, I think this makes the risk of a large-scale terrorist attack on a global scale much more likely. And I think the risk to everyone is increased because of this.
And it's been 24 years. We see a lot of memorials across the United States at the moment. But beyond just memorials, with the use of the internet, they have been able to identify some of the victims that were involved in that blast. But is there a better way to remember some of these victims beyond just the memorials that we see today?
It's a good question. The U.S. decided early on, right? In the United States, we have something called Pearl Harbor Day, which goes back to the beginning of the U.S. entry into World War II, when there was an attack on the U.S. naval base in Pearl Harbor that killed also about 3,000 people. And that still is a day on our calendar. It's not a holiday, but it's a day on the calendar. It was decided after 9/11 they would not do this, that there was not going to be that kind of memorial. Instead, there are individual memorials, especially in the cities that were attacked in New York and Washington, D.C. There are memorials in Pennsylvania, and some other cities also have these memorials. But this was almost a quarter of a century ago now. A lot of people have no memory that were born since then, are adults now. They have no memory of the attack. And so I think there's it was a lesson, but I think it's disappeared to a certain extent. And I think at the same time, one of the other things that was generated by 9/11, oddly enough, was a real growth in conspiracy theories, and this gets back to your point about the issues of new world with AI and internet. And these conspiracy theorists, they call them truthers in the U.S. They sort of believe that it wasn't actually Al Qaeda that did the damage to the Pentagon and these two towers; that it was some sort of internal plot and whatever. And this is undermining, I think, the sort of theme that this was this great attack on the United States and on democracy, and it's muddied the waters, and it's meant the rise of people, authoritarians like Trump, I think, in the U.S., but also in other countries. There's this sort of belief that there's international conspiracies and things like that, and that's sort of because you can find any information you want on the internet. It means that the real truth and the accuracy is fading now, and harder to share. So it's creating problems that again could lead to the same sort of terrorist risks that we had before 9/11.
President Emeritus International Stability Operations Association, Doc Brooks, thank you for talking to us at this time.
A pleasure.